Through the written word and the spoken word, may we come to know the living word, our Savior Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Please be seated. So apparently all we have to do is just nag God long enough and he'll answer our prayers. Although I've never heard it necessarily put that boldly, I sadly have heard many sermons on this text and others specifically saying, if we just pray long enough, if we pray hard enough, if we have enough faith, God will give us whatever we want. And while I absolutely believe in the power of prayer, and there's no question that we're supposed to pray always, Jesus says that, to think that it's merely some sort of supply and demand relationship where if we just keep praying, or if our faith is deep enough and hard enough, that we'll get whatever we ask for, is just demonstrably not true. I think we've probably all experienced those moments when some miraculous thing happens in prayer and prayers are answered, especially because of somebody's persistent faith. But more often I would say we've all experienced people who, of deep and sincere faith, pray for something for years and never see it bearing fruit. So I really kind of take issue with the theology that says that God can be coerced into giving us what we want, that our effort has much bearing on whether or not our prayers are answered. And worst of all, that our faith, which is what at the end of the gospel Jesus says, am I going to find faith? That our faith would be based merely on when our prayers are answered, because most of the time they aren't. But I would wager for all of us here, and probably anybody that you ask, people who've prayed long and hard about something and not seen any of the specific fruit born of their prayers, whether those prayers were in vain, or whether they should not have prayed, or whether they regret the prayer, I would say probably across the board people would say no, absolutely not. Because in prayer, something much deeper than just simply asking for a thing and having it given is going on. Prayer is the place where we, like we just sang, we take all of those things to the Lord. We take our burdens, we take our joys, we take our thanksgivings, and we sit with them, and we struggle with them. And it's in the prayer that not necessarily something that we ask for is given, but that we are transformed, that we are brought into deeper relationship with God, that we are able to be real with God. So I actually want to go back and spend a little bit more time with this kind of strange passage from Genesis, because I think it's so rich in symbolism. It kind of gives us a good example of this struggle. To really get the full meaning of what's going on here, our lesson kind of picks up right in the middle of this story. So I'd like to give a little bit of context about Jacob. So Jacob, as probably we all remember, is the younger two of the twin sons of Isaac, who is Abraham's son. So he's the grandson of Abraham, and the younger two of these twins. And the name Jacob means, it's related to the Hebrew word for heel, and the scripture tells us they named him that because he was born holding on to the heel of his older brother Esau, which usually is interpreted to be foreshadowing the fact that he's going to usurp his older brother and take the birthright for himself. But also, heel in Hebrew, as within older usage English, somebody who's a heel is kind of a shifty person or somebody who's untrustworthy. And so Jacob really lives into this name, and it's demonstrated throughout his life. He first tricks his brother into selling his birthright for a bowl of soup, and then he lies to his father and tricks him into believing that he's actually Esau, the older son, so that he can kind of steal the blessing and the birthright. And then he tricks his in-laws into being able to marry the woman that he wants, and then he tricks his in-laws into receiving more of his fair share of the inheritance. So our story kind of picks up here. Jacob's running away from his in-laws because they found out what he's done, fleeing back to his homeland when he receives word that his older brother Esau is there waiting for him with 400 men. So now he's trapped, kind of between his whole life of deception is caught up with him, and on both sides he sees the fruit of his deception. And so this is where our story then picks up at night. And I desperately wanted to turn this into a lecture on John of the Cross's Dark Night of the Soul, but we have a youth group trip scheduled after church. I'm sure we're all anxious to get to the orchard. But what I'll say is kind of the gist of St. John of the Cross, dark night of the soul. He uses the metaphor of night, that place of darkness, of unclarity, of really struggling, for the place where God actually does the most in our life, the place where God kind of confronts us with ourselves and transforms us and changes us. So here we have Jacob in the night, all of a sudden finds himself wrestling. Most people interpret this person, this being, it says a man, but usually it's thought of as kind of a metaphor for God, sometimes an angel standing in place of God. But there are also some interpretations that interpret it as the devil or Jacob's own demons. I kind of like to leave it ambiguous. This text is full of ambiguities and a lot of room for interpretation. And I kind of like it not being totally clear who this is, because when we're struggling in our prayer life, often it feels like we're wrestling with God, we're wrestling with the devil, we're wrestling with our own demons, we're wrestling with our guardian angel maybe, and really all of those places, or all of those people kind of team up on us. So here we have Jacob engaged in this deep struggle, and he just persists. He's finally at a place where he recognizes his life of deception has caught up with him, and it's time to persist and struggle through. And even after he's injured, he still persists. And so then it says as daybreak is coming. So now he's having some clarity. He's kind of getting to a place where he's understanding what's going on. He realizes that this is his chance. He needs to ask for the blessing. And so he says he refuses to let go until he gets this blessing. At which point this person or whatever asks him for his name. And of course he says, Jacob. Now the last time that he was asking for a blessing and asked what his name was, he said Esau. He lied. So now, after this struggle, he's asked, what's your name? Basically, who are you? And he's forced to say, I'm the usurper. I'm the heel. I'm the deceptive, shifty person. And it's not until he names himself, he says who he actually is, that then this angel or this person or God or turns around and gives him a new name and says, you are Israel, the one who has striven with God and persevered. And as we all know, Israel is not just Jacob's name, it becomes the name of his descendants, the nation of Israel, the people of God, that we are incorporated to by adoption in our baptism. So we are also the people of Israel. So this Jacob is not just a nice story for our own personal struggle, it's a story of the struggle of the people of God. We are to be the ones who struggle and strive with God to receive the blessing, to be changed, to be left with a limb. Those encounters with God always leave you with a mark. But we persevere. And so even St. Paul in his letter, which is a really personally significant passage, so it was tempting for me to spend more time with that one too, but he says persevere whether the time's favorable or it's unfavorable, with the utmost patience. So that's the faith that Jesus is looking for when he comes. And I really like the word fidelity because it implies both the having of faith and the acting out of your faith. Both things are applied in that word together, and I think that's what true faithfulness is. It's the having of faith, trusting, that we can take all of these things to God in prayer, whether they're answered or not, that we just continue to persevere. So let's pray that, like Jacob and the widow and Diana and her blanket, that we can persevere and be the people that Jesus finds faithful when he